28 seconds.
27.
26.
25 seconds.
24. 23.
22 seconds.
21 seconds.
22 seconds.
19.
18.
17 seconds.
16.
15 seconds.
14.
13 seconds.
12. 11.
10 seconds. 9.
8.
7.
6.
6 what?
Copy.
5 seconds.
3.
2.
1.
Welcome to a very special edition of Subspace Chatter. I'm your host today. We're going to be talking about the TNG episode, The Outrageous Okona, which might seem like a weird topic 30 years on, but with the last 2 episodes of Prodigy dealing with it, and we've been gabbing about it here for weeks, we thought we'd do something a little special. So let's go around and introduce ourselves.
Hi, I'm Vanessa, and I have a YouTube channel called I Love Bad Star Trek.
Hey, I'm Eve, and I'm with the Starfleet Academy College of Music, and I have my fuzzy, bear with me, Spock bear.
Wonderful. Our first question today. How would you compare Riker's womanizing to Okona's?
I think Okona is a bit more cocky, entitled, kind of just thinks, okay, as soon as I open my mouth in the direction of a person who resembles a woman, I am going to have some kind of physical relationship with her. Whereas Riker is a bit more subtle, kind of feels kind of like he'll notice them. He gives them the eyes. He doesn't make it a secret that he's into somebody, but his approach is a lot more subtle.
I would have to say, too, the one thing I do get is for Riker, he's got a little bit of the Captain Kirk, I'm here today, bang you tonight, gone tomorrow type thing. Whereas Okona, when he is talking to the women he is interested in, I get the sense that for him, okay, yeah, he's a drifter and stuff, but unlike Riker, that's kind of upfront that he's not going to see them again. But I will say the one thing I do like about Okona, and I'll give Riker this too, but more Okona, is neither one of them actually shames the women that they pursue. Like, they just see it as, like, yeah, I'm into women and I'm into getting some, but hey, if the woman is, into it too, then that's all cool with me. So at least there's that much. So he's not like a total pervert, at least. But I mean, I also got the sense that Riker was a little bit jealous that Okona's a better womanizer than he is.
I wouldn't say better, honestly. I see Okona as someone a bit more desperate. You get, as soon as he gets off of the transporter, the first person he sees, literally the first person he sees as all of his molecules are solidifying, is like, I am going after this human being. I also see Riker as somebody that kind of allows women to come to him versus, making a beeline for somebody. So that's how I see it.
We got a couple comments from Scott saying Okona was indeed outrageous, truly, truly outrageous. Wait, am I mixing my references? I think Riker's Starfleet discipline tempers him somewhat. I could see that. I get a little more of a Han Solo vibe from Okona. Like, he seems more like a little more Han Solo, less Kirk.
I think the only real major difference is that Okona probably is only a womanizer, where Riker, he doesn't really care what gender or species you are.
True.
Actually true. There is that planet with the I can't remember the episode, but the planet with the gender neutral people, where they're like agendered or non-gendered, and he pursues that kind of relationship. So
originally, Jonathan Frakes wanted the alien to transition to be male rather than female, but the studio didn't want that to happen. So, technically, Riker is, I believe, basically pansexual.
or at the very least bisexual. I never knew that, actually. I didn't know he wanted the studio to make it to make the character turn male instead of female. I mean, for me, that was a depressing episode all around. So
Yeah, he thought it was too cheap and too easy to just go for, oh, well, we're going to bring in a non-binary character, but we're going to make a love interest in between what's ostensibly a male and a female still.
that's a little bit like the trope of, you know, of like females, I shouldn't say girls, but people who identify as female, you know, being bi or pan, and guys coming along and being like, oh, well, you just need the right guy.
Yeah, I think the thing about like womanizing is objectifying them, seeing them as a goal, seeing them as a notch on your bedpost. And I think Okona sort of frames his pursuits much more like that. And Riker just looks like he's having fun and doesn't really mind if it goes one way or the other. If they say no, cool. If they say yes, cool. Like, he's much more mature about it.
Okona does have a kind of magnetism, though, like the bad boy, you know. I mean, I know it's a trope that girls like, I shouldn't say females like the bad boy, but, you know, he's got that bad boy vibe and he knows it. It's like he's working the bad boy vibe, whereas Riker's almost, you know, relying a little bit on the uniform.
Yeah, he's definitely a charisma 9 out of 10 character. Yeah, I mean, we see him with 2 different women in the episode.
And neither one of them's Deanna for a change.
That's a really good point. Basically, she got every stray love interest in the show.
She did, other than Beverly's ghost. So, like, for me, I was noticing that. I'm like, wait a sec. The ones he's pursuing are like the transporter operator and stuff like that. He's not pursuing Deanna, the one in the spandex cat suit. So that was
So you kind of have to wonder, you know, how much of a reflection of the writers is Okona, you know, like seeing somebody that is like of a lower rank and seeing them as an opportunity rather than seeing somebody that's like a peer or like a commander or a lieutenant or something. You know what I mean? Like, there's a bit of a power dynamic there.
There is, but Deanna's outfit kind of makes her look like she's not a peer, not a, just because it, like, I mean, even Jellicoe made the comment about her outfit, and I know the actress, same with Jerry Ryan, said that the cat suits were the worst part of the role because they were like, you know, if I ate one bite too many, I couldn't fit in my costume type idea. So I think in a way the cat suits were a little bit disservice to them because it kind of diminished who they were.
It wasn't just a little disservice. I mean, Jerry Ryan had actual medical complications from it because she'd hold her pee and not go because she'd have to have a team of people that took 20 minutes to get her out of the suit.
I heard she was sewed into it, so.
And also, she had to wear a corset under there to sort of like give it a robotic feel or whatever excuse they made to make her wear a corset every day. I mean, that's just ridiculous. Like, I love what she's in outfit wise now.
Yeah.
So our next question was, does anybody get the sense that Picard doesn't like Okona from the start? He seems, I don't know what this word is. If somebody can help me.
Brusque. So blunt.
Yeah, he's like prickly.
But Riker is amused. Okay.
I think Picard's like that with everybody. I think he's just a brusque man, you know? He, like, when he runs into people initially, he kind of gives them his stoic professional self. And then he's a very private person. So it takes a lot to sort of chip past that. So I don't get the sense that anybody really enjoys Okona except for Wesley and Riker and the women that he somehow managed to scam into bed.
He just has to walk into the room. He doesn't need to scam them.
And to be fair, he does have consent. They do have consent there. The women are not forced.
Right. No, I know that. But it just seems so greasy.
Yes. I mean, one thing I noticed too, I was thinking about this, was in the first few seasons, Picard is a lot more uptight, like he has more of a stick up his rear end, to use the expression. Whereas I found that later on, he became a little more relaxed in dealing with other people they ran across. He's the Red Foreman of Enterprise.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Absolutely agreed.
Although I can't see him doing a whole thing of foot up your ass comments like Red Foreman.
You can see it on his face. He doesn't have to.
He doesn't have he's in the early, but I notice he has less patience though in the earlier seasons. And whereas when he's later on in the episode being more diplomatic, you see a change in his personality. Like he's talking to Okona and being like, okay, talk to me. What is this? You know, so I have to wonder if, you know, that was just him still getting kind of a feel for the role in some ways.
Yeah, and I've noticed this for a long time. Picard was really a block of wood for those mostly the first two seasons, somewhat into season 3. And it's amazing that it takes him becoming a Borg for him to truly become more human. And it kicks off what I call is the Picard is human arc, which starts there and ends when his brother's kid dies, and his brother.
Scott says, shout out to Kurtwood Smith for being an awesome president of the Federation. Yeah, fair.
Yeah, yep.
Or was it Earth? I mean, yeah, but I did notice that like Picard almost had to have his humanity taken away to really be human. But I sometimes wonder too if that's a lot to do with because I mean he's one of the last of the so named great British thespians, like great Shakespearean actors. And
right.
You can see it more in the early seasons. You see that Shakespearean stage influence in how he carries himself, how he walks, like I could see Janeway walking up to him and going, you know, relax before you sprain something like she does to Harry Kim, because he's so stiff.
Also, I think Patrick Stewart himself was sort of struggling to take the role seriously because he kind of foresaw this show being canceled quite soon. I don't think he even saw it going into season 2 or even having a full first season. So I think it was partly also, I think he was, you know, it took a long time for like the crew to sort of get used to each other and how goofy they are. Mm-hmm. Like the crew always say, like the cast always says, like Patrick Stewart was the most serious one for a while, but they got him eventually to sort of relax. So
Dan says it seems like Picard's relaxation into the role also accompanied Patrick Stewart relaxing into the role, which yeah. And then Rob says Stewart did want to do it. He had to be convinced to take the audition. And Dan says that's precisely what I meant, Vanessa. So yeah. I mean, the episode, I think it's called The Big Goodbye in season 1 was originally like the soft ending in case they were going to cancel it, if I recall. I could be wrong on the name of the episode or which episode it was, but I'm pretty sure it was The Big Goodbye.
Right. You are right.
Okay. I'm not good with those. And Scott says Kurtwood was great in Year of Hell. Yeah.
I do think Picard probably looked at Okona and thought, like, maybe there was a little bit of like projective identification there. Like, this is what I could have been if I went down a different road kind of thing. And maybe he was a little bit, like a teensy bit resentful of that. You see, like sometimes in certain episodes, there's certain passions that get touched on with Picard, like with his archaeology and wanting to, you know, dig into the past. And, you know, this guy lives a life where he can just do whatever he wants, whenever he wants. And, you know, I could see Picard being like, I wish I could do that, and being a little jealous.
And Scott goes, that wasn't me, but thanks. Sorry, Scott. Between the person,
whoever, somebody else who cares, and opinions no one cares about.
Whoever the viewer is who cares, I'm sorry. I got confused with Scott, which is opinions no one cares about. So apologies to both of you.
The last thing I wanted to say about Picard is for all the flaws of season 2 of Picard, I really liked the whole thing with his mom. It gives an explanation for why he feels so stern and rigid in those first couple of seasons until he has his humanity taken and builds it back up from the Borg.
I just thought it was weird because, like, they're in the Federation's a thing at that point, where they presumably have like mental health services available. Like, why she was like shoved into a closet, that was bananas. But anyways.
Yeah, but I mean, we don't have proof. We do have proof that even in the 24th century that mental health is still for some
There's still
people.
a stigma.
There's still a stigma for some people when it comes to accessing mental health. And I mean, Star Trek has consistently had that through all the way up through everything. I mean, even look at Nog in Deep Space Nine. You know, there's the whole like Lwaxana never sought help for the loss of Kestra, even though you think Betazoids, who are notoriously open species and everything. So, and a lot of them go into counseling and stuff like that. So, I mean, mental health is still like somewhat stigmatized, and that could be because of the times that a lot of these are still being written in. But maybe in the future, mental health is still like a little bit of one of those final frontiers that we're still trying to understand, because it's harder to quantify than physical like ailment. So, I mean, that could be an issue.
I think Reg Barkley definitely proves everything you just said.
Poor Reg.
So, what's the most significant thing to change about Okona in the nearly 20 years between this episode and when we see him again in both Lower Decks and more recently in Prodigy?
I almost have to think he's become a little bit less ethical. He's a little bit more elastic in his morals. I don't want to say he's an outright criminal because it's Okona, so that would just be a total flip. And with Prodigy, of course, they're going to make things very like black and white. Everything fits in a box because it's for a younger audience. But I do get the sense that Okona, whatever's happened to him in 20 years, has definitely made his morals and his ethics a little more elastic. And Scott says his eye apparently, and what's keeping his patch on? The Force. Oh, wait, that's the wrong franchise.
Yeah, like I get the sense that he's much more self-interested. He's much more about the money, and much more like into preserving his own safety at the expense of other people. Much more like, yeah, just kind of keeping an eye out for himself. The one he's got left.
Yeah, Scott just brought up the, keeping the eye patch on. What's keeping it on? I hadn't realized until this, and going back and looking at that Lower Decks episode where he showed up, that he indeed has an eye patch in that. It's such a quick flash, you don't really get it unless you look at it. It's like, oh my God, they thought ahead, and especially where that's basically about the same year as we're in now.
So Rob says, I like the Okona design in Prodigy. And Dan says, I think Okona's libido reduces as he ages. Well, that's most men typically. Unless you're like that gentleman in, I think it was India, who's in his 70s and he's fathered like 90 children.
I think also it's a show on Nickelodeon. They're not going to have him hitting on every Romulan woman he finds. So that's probably.
Rob says nothing to be ashamed of.
You don't think there was a little bit of a creepy thing between him and Gwyn?
But we don't really know how old Gwyn is, so.
That's a good point. That's why I just say creepy and not wrong necessarily. And
different species have different, like we know from Dr. Phlox, he's the best example, him and his wives, and the whole thing with Trip Tucker. I mean, we know that not all alien cultures and things have the same morals and ethics and, rules or unwritten rules or whatever about such things. So, I mean, we don't really know if she's old, if she's, of majority for her species or whatever. But yeah, with the Nickelodeon thing, they couldn't really have him being like, hey, baby.
Right.
Like giving doll pointers on how to pick up women, that's as he did with Wesley or other people. Like, yeah, that's not going to happen.
Dan says, the production teams discuss the eyepiece, cool synchronization. And then Who Cares says, tried watching Prodigy, but it seemed too childish. When that talking cat or kitten came out, I turned off.
Yeah, it's a show for kids. I mean, we only watch it because we're extreme Star Trek fans and we like to talk about it here.
Or if you're like me and you just need completion or you'll suffer.
I'm in another camp entirely. I think that Prodigy is the best serialized Star Trek, the new generation out there. Personally, for me, I think the story that it's telling is the best one that's out right now. Personally,
Dan says,
Yeah.
I love the Katin in Prodigy. So great to see them back after Maress and Tass. I actually like seeing I'm assuming it's Katian. I like Cation. Okay. I like seeing them in a role where they're not, there for obvious eye candy, because no offense, Maress was obvious cartoon eye candy. Just the way she's drawn, the way she's outfitted. Whereas you've got Tiana, and she's like the opposite. She's more like a cross between the EMH of Voyager and Pulaski. She's so no nonsense. This is how it is. She's got a little bit of McCoy. She's kind of got all the vinegar from all the other medical officers all in one character.
Yeah, this was an established species, Cation, by the way. Who cares? Okay, and Dan. Yeah. Yep.
I think they're Dahl and Gwen are in their late teens. 14, 15, 16.
And then that's when you start to get gray areas, because even
Rock Talk has to be way younger.
Well, I guess it depends on how you look at that, because then she went through some amount of time in the last half season where she experienced potentially years. We don't really know there, but coming into the season, yes.
And the thing is, once you get into teen years, I mean, even on Earth, that becomes a gray area, because up until 200 years ago, 14-year-old girls getting married was a thing that was extremely common. It's less, and it's still sanctioned in some cultures now. So again, that goes back to the whole, we don't really know the ethics and morals that govern each species. And I think that's also, I think, part of the reason why, other than the obvious scientific repercussions, why there's always been that rule about, because Trip falls afoul of it, of not, engaging with other species without approval if you're in Starfleet. Whereas Okona is not in Starfleet, so he's not going to be bound by that.
Why does Okona treat Wesley with respect?
I don't know if he really treats him with respect, to be honest. I think it's more that he enjoys that Wesley admires him and is inquisitive about him and curious about him and asking him questions. So it's that's a narcissist's food is, oh, you want to know about me? I get to talk about me. So he's happy to do that and indulge him. But I never really saw Okona ask Wesley about him, or what his interests were.
But he doesn't really put him down either.
Yeah, but that's a bare minimum. But I'm talking respecting, in a conversation, there should be some sort of back and forth. I only saw Wesley asking him questions.
Well, there's a later question that we have coming up that leads back to this one in a way, but to me, it was okay, I see the hero worship aspect, but at the same time, right from the get-go, he doesn't dismiss Wesley. And he does not dismiss him, whereas Picard's attitude from the get-go is, shut up, Wesley. He dismisses him. He wants him off the bridge. He wants him out of sight. And the whole crew is always so dismissive of Wesley. And this is the first time that somebody's not dismissive of him right away. And I think maybe that's part of why Wesley was interested in asking him things, and Wesley had some admiration, because this is a guy who's doing all sorts of cool things, and he's living a completely different life, because Wesley's essentially a Starfleet brat, but he's not being dismissed for once. Okona does talk to him, even when he does talk to him, he talks to him like he's meeting him at his age, instead of Wesley's just a child.
I think it's because all of a sudden, this is season 2, so this is early days. Wesley just sort of gotten thrusted onto the bridge in a sort of sweeping act of nepotism. Yes, he is, very talented, but I don't think he would have gotten on the bridge had it not been for his mother advocating for that. So I think that him being on the bridge puts him way ahead of a lot of other people in a very short amount of time, which I think
helps.
in a professional environment is going to cause a lot of static.
But at the
So
same
I
time,
don't think that makes it okay to like look down on him and tell him, oh, you're just a kid, da da da. But it's like, why is it that I've been in Starfleet Academy and like been, trying to build my career so that I can be on the bridge of the Enterprise, and all he has to do is fall out of somebody who happens to be chief medical officer, That's how I saw it.
the Traveler did have a hand in that though too, because they didn't really see any potential in Wesley until the Traveler spoke up and kind of gave Picard a smack across the head.
Yeah, I think Picard already knew that Wesley was, an advanced, very intelligent person. But like, I see like as far as like a, work environment, that it would be pretty tense to have like a kid go above you, like, and be at the helm of the flagship of Starfleet. So that's probably why. And I don't think Okona has that kind of baggage. So.
Yeah, it certainly helps when the captain of said flagship killed your father and kind of owes you a favor.
Yeah, that's kind of true. Because, that was established in the first episode when Riker asks how they knew Picard, and he's like, he brought my father's body home type idea. Rob says he's just fulfilling the rock and roll uncle support role. And Scott says Okona's the Han Solo type, which I said he's like a Han Solo. He needs a wide-eyed kid around to look up to him. But yeah, that was just the one thing I noticed, is just like he doesn't dismiss Wesley. That was the one thing, like, and he could have been more arrogant to Wesley, but I never got a sense of arrogance when he's talking to Wesley. Like, sure, he likes to show off his things and stuff and brag a little bit, but he's not arrogant about it to Wesley. He's kind of like, this is just who I am. This is just what I do.
I mean, that is kind of arrogance though, isn't it? To be quite that certain of yourself. And like the whole vocabulary that he was whipping out, like the doldrums of my existence. Please. He's
a little bit of a showman though. And I think that plays back into the charisma, because if you're going to be somebody who's doing the kind of things that Okona was doing, whether for right or for wrong, you need that kind of charisma and bluster to get it across. And I get like, that's like a trope too, like a TV trope. So, it's not the first time we've seen somebody, hell, look at Chaotica and Voyager and his grandiose language, So I think for him, it's more like, I got the sense that his big language is almost a little bit of a front too. Like he's confident, but even still, he's a little bit lonely and insecure.
Orville Nation says early TNG is always a fun experience. Well, it's an experience. Fun's not always the word I'd choose to use, but
that's like a lot of my channel is the first two seasons of
season 3 TOS, first 2 seasons of TNG.
Yeah, but Star Trek has that kind of established pattern with most of them, where it takes them like a season or so to actually figure out what the heck they're doing, so we can all follow.
Not with TOS. TOS season 1 is
yeah.
It's the only one that I'd say it worked backwards. It was like nearly perfect from season 1 and got
Strange New Worlds.
We were only through 1 season, so we'll see what happens there. And there's still one bad episode there for me, but that's me.
For me, there's just a really bad casting decision in season 1 of Strange New Worlds.
If we're thinking the same one, probably.
I'm not sure. It's just I find his voice really hard to understand.
Are we thinking about the last episode?
I'm not sure about the last episode, but it involves a certain medical officer.
Okay, we are not thinking the same.
Okay. I love the actor, to be honest. It's just I have a lot of difficulty with his voice, like, and I know I'm not the only one, because I've seen it on forums. Like some of us have said, like, he's a good actor, but he needs to like project a little bit, because with his accent and the way he has a quiet, soft delivery, it can be hard to follow him sometimes. And for me, it's synesthesia. I see his voice, and for me, his voice comes across as a little bit, I can't grasp it totally. So, but I mean, he's a great actor. It's just, I wish he would speak up a little more.
I agree with Dan. Season 1 of TOS and Voyager, good stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah, I don't have any real big complaints about season 1 of Voyager, but that's just it.
The premiere
there's no real highs, but
yeah, the premiere seems so slapdash and like very the house that Jack built. Like they just sort of tack on more elements, and it's like this is just becoming a bit of a monster.
Go ahead.
Oh, I did appreciate the fact that they took their time in introducing all the characters. I liked how they were introduced and everything, but like the way that the original crew just disappeared and no one cared, and like suddenly they have Maquis on and it's no big deal. It's just, it was very rushed.
But to be fair, I mean, with TNG, there was a break. I mean, you had the animated series with its short run, but there really was a gap there before they got into TNG. So that kind of makes sense. And they had new people coming in to help out and everything. Whereas there was a lot of overlap between TNG, DS9, and Voyager because they all ran concurrently to a point. So you had a lot more of the shared writers and things, and a lot more of shared characters, shared actors, stuff like that. So to be fair for TNG, because of that break, I think if there hadn't been the gap, we might not have had such like a rocky start to it. Because I mean, Discovery, you look at the first season of Discovery and it tends to get a lot of mixed reviews for the same reason. Like it feels like they don't know what they're doing yet. It feels a little bit kind of.
It still feels like they don't know what they're doing.
But. And also on the first season of TNG, they reused a lot of the scripts that they were going to use for Star Trek Phase 2, which didn't really fit with TNG at all, like tonally. So there was like they were trying to like, oh, it's a new generation. It's a completely different crew where it's going to be a completely different approach. And yet same structure, same, especially things like, Monster. The bad one.
Yeah. The whole monster of the week thing with no like thread.
Exactly. And like, yeah, it just,
I should say alien of the week, not monster of the week. They weren't all monsters.
Yeah. It just didn't translate.
Yeah. Dan says there was a lot of overlap, between TOS and TNG in the early making of TNG, which is I think what you're referring to. And then Scott goes, not knowing what they're doing isn't my problem with Disco. I don't know if
we'll
that's
have to come back and talk about that, Scott.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Dan says there were only 2 scripts reused from Phase 2, The Child and Devil's Due.
But it looked like Roddenberry wrote a lot of the early stuff, and you could tell, like, Angel 1, that is a Roddenberry thing. Like,
Although I did like seeing Riker have the tables turned in Angel 1. That's the only thing that saves that episode for me, that makes it watchable, is watching Riker in the like Riker's the pursued instead of the pursuer, and seeing him in that ridiculous outfit.
80s feminism at its best. Truly.
But you know what? He took it. Like, I have to give respect. He did take it, and he was like, hey, I'm going down there. It's their culture. I'm going to respect it. And he even gave Worf, heck for Worf's formal outfit. Worf said, it makes me look like I'm wearing a dress. Rob says, I support all monsters of the week.
This is just purely a fun chat today that is completely and totally devolved away from our original topic, and that's okay, because this is a pretty mediocre topic, but our next questions might make it more interesting. Because for me, the best part of this episode is Data. Or at least the things that surround Data's B-plot here. Our next question was, does Data's attempts at understanding humor possibly reflect the experience of people with certain divergences who may have difficulty with humor and sarcasm?
And I'm the guilty party for this question. So to use Dan's phrase, bear with me. A little bit of background. I had a student who was on the spectrum. I have a lot of students on the spectrum, but this was my first one. And he got really into Star Trek. And he related a lot to Data and Data's attempts at trying to interact with the human crew and a lot of things going over his head. And I've seen on different forums other people who are on the autism spectrum saying the same thing, or people with other similar neurodivergences saying that Data is relatable to them with his attempts to understand humor. And I was noticing in this episode, like Data really trying to grasp the idea of humor, and it's a big deal to him, and he's not getting it, but he's pursuing it. And with my student, I know he got into a thing where he wanted to pursue humor and sarcasm. He wanted to understand it. So we had a kind of rapport that he was allowed to try out his humor on me as long as he respected it. If I said, that's a private joke for friends, not a public joke for people, because he had like Data, he had some jokes that were just like, holy geez, man, like, don't say that. And then
How many times was Data cut off in the run of TNG from a very sexualized joke?
But at the same time, he would unintentionally make other jokes like Data did and not realize he made a joke. And then you'd have to refer back like Data does in his memory banks, like he does with the very final joke he makes by accident when he's like, goodbye, Data. And then he goes back in his memory banks and everything. And it's like, still works. So I was kind of wondering, with having people, like seeing a lot of people say that Data to them is a character they relate to if they're divergent. I mean, does this maybe reflect that for a lot of people? Like, is this maybe a little bit of a portrayal of what it's like for people who don't intrinsically grasp that to see? I don't know if I'm wording this right.
No, I see what you mean. And Dan is sort of piggybacking off of that. I think the episode deliberately portrays a spectrum of social ability from Data to Okona. I know that might be controversial, but each of us is entitled to our opinions. No, I get it. No, I
agree with Dan.
I don't like the episode, but I definitely see your point.
I agree with Dan. Dan kind of hit the nail on the head there. You got Okona, who's just so out there, and he's so boisterous and confident, whether it's real or not. And he's just so easy, and he moves between people and everything. And then you got Data, who's, even Data was trying to understand Okona. And then he was seeking advice from Guinan. You see Data on so it seems like they represent almost like two sides of the same seesaw. Or two sides of the same.
Yeah, I mean, like, I understand that certain folks who have different difficulty understanding social cues often take things sort of literally, and you see Data doing that a lot. Yeah, where he will like hear something and it doesn't land on him as a joke. He will just respond as if that was an actual earnest inquiry or statement. But the thing is, like, I think that like what could have happened is that somebody actually worked with Data and actually got to know Data and found his own sense of humor, his own humorous voice, rather than trying to place one on top of him to cater to other people. I do think Data is, I think anybody is capable of humor. I think it's just really like, I don't know. I just didn't think that Data was guided very well.
I kind of got that too. But I mean, he also was picking up on that too. Like, he realized the holodeck audience was programmed to laugh at him regardless, and like Rob says, the Joe Capisco wasn't helping him at all. Data picked up on that right away, like pretty quickly on, like, okay, these guys are going to laugh at me no matter what. So this isn't working. This isn't what I wanted. So, I mean, I kind of wonder, because I see people, again, in my work, I see, like, working with people who are divergent and seeing them when they do get worked with and they get mentored and they get, that kind of thing, and seeing them develop. Like, my student ended up having quite the sarcastic sense of humor and became quite good at zingers. Like, he'd just come out of nowhere and he'd have everybody in the room laughing, and he knew he was doing it by that point. Whereas you get poor Data and he's got nobody really. I mean, he's got Geordi, and Geordi's a great guy to him, but Geordi's not funny.
Mm-hmm. I like, Geordi just sort of says, well, that was funny, instead of the thing you said before. Yeah. But then Data asks him to explain and he can't. really, because it's just sort of a gut feeling that you get.
Yeah.
It's difficult to sort of translate that into sort of literal terms, exactly like what humor is and everything. So it's a much more instinctual, emotional thing. And I think, yeah, if somebody was just a better teacher to Data, he would be amazing at it. I think he's already really funny, even if he doesn't mean it.
I mean, he gets a little bit more of a sense of humor as time goes on too. I mean, one of my favorite Data lines to this day is, you know, in First Contact when he grabs his like phaser rifle and he's like, saddle up, lock and load, and you know he knows what he's doing, like. And that's after he was told to turn off his emotion chip because he was busy relating how he felt. And Picard's like, turn that thing off. Like, so, I mean, he does develop a sense of humor over time, or at least somewhat of a sense of humor. So, and Guinan was trying to help as best she could, but
also, I think it's also like people are sort of framing it in sort of neurotypical terms. Like they have to get neurotypical humor rather than their own sense of humor, you know, like why does it have to cater to us? Why can't it, you know, anyways.
That's why I kind of wondered if this maybe, like, I know at the time frame of this episode, neurodivergences were only just becoming to be like a little more mainstream in the Western world, and people were getting a little more open about, you know, kids who were a little bit different attending regular schools with assistants and stuff like that, instead of just like my parents' generation, for instance, where they just kind of shove them in a home and forget about them. So even if the writers didn't deliberately do that, I just felt like this kind of maybe is one of those episodes that's like, yeah, if you're looking at it from a completely different perspective, you know, how hard would it be to relate to? Like I say, if I'm wording this correctly.
Oh, I think you definitely are. You had a really great, clear message here about the kids and the... I'm not having a very good message and bringing it out here very well, but I think you said it as succinctly as one could say. And someday, not today, I would love to have the discussion with you, Eve, about whether Worf has some neurodivergences.
That I would love to have a discussion on, because I have thoughts on that one. I definitely have thoughts on Worf and a few other characters.
And to, you know, to Robert Sherman's comment, like, I agree. Joe Piscopo wasn't helpful. He just said, you know, here's some one-liners.
Yeah.
And, you know, that was pretty much the beginning and end of his tutelage. Also making a lot of weird noises.
Yeah.
Really? Like that's not guidance. That doesn't really help anything. And all Data did was try to imitate him. And you can tell when you see comedy and you see somebody doing something derivative, you can pick it up immediately. So, you know, even if that audience wasn't just auto laughing, you can kind of pick up on Data's just mimicking. He hasn't found his comic voice.
Yeah. I mean, for myself, I shared with you guys that I have a couple of friends who are stand-up comedians, and one in particular. And the thing that they've always said about doing stand-up comedy is part of it is originality, part of it is timing, and part of it is not being overly scripted, because people can tell if it's scripted and then it's not funny. I mean, the example I always come back to when it comes to comedy is, say, Will Smith in his Fresh Prince and comic days versus Robin Williams, who was active at the same time. Will Smith is funny, but it's a very scripted funny. Like, he stays on a script for the most part. He might improvise a little bit here and there, but it's fairly scripted. Whereas Robin Williams, the reason why he was such a brilliant comedic actor is he was literally so manic and so off the cuff, in the spirit of the moment. I mean, like they said, when he recorded Aladdin, every time he recorded his lines, they'd have to go back and redraw the genie because he didn't stick to the script. He was just throwing everything out there, but it worked because he, you know, it wasn't rehearsed. And I think comedy to an extent can't be rehearsed. It just has to evolve.
Before you even brought up Robin Williams, I was thinking how much the scene where Joe Piscopo is going like, oh yeah, with the fish in the briefcase, and some people think Tip O'Neill in a dress is hilarious. And I was thinking back to that exact thing, Robin Williams, when he first comes out of the lamp in Aladdin there, and he's just going crazy. And yeah, that entire movie, there was a script, but they didn't do the animation till after because they knew Robin was going to just improv the whole thing. And you're absolutely right.
Spontaneity is really important. And again, if it seems rehearsed, like there's a stand-up comedian that I've seen where I've seen their routine a few times, and
it's a
it's
little
like
different every time, isn't it?
No, it's not.
Oh.
And that's the thing. You can kind of pick up on this feels like a recording, like
I think the only rehearsed comedian I can really watch, and that's because he's just unique, is Jeff Dunham with his ventriloquism, which I get that has to be rehearsed because ventriloquism is an art form in itself. But just having seen him in person a couple of times, like no matter what, he's always changes things, and he does try to base some of what he does off audience reaction. But outside of, say, his type of comedy with his ventriloquism, scripted comedy just doesn't feel the same. I mean, one of the most unintentionally comedic moments for my friend was he was a very large man. I mean, we used to say he was like a giant marshmallow. He was a very, very large man. And he had this picture taken of him doing stand-up comedy. And he didn't realize that the name of the comedy show was right behind him on a sign. And it said Tiny Comedy Show. Well, that was funny because it was just random, but when he was talking about the guy with the fish suitcase and wearing a dress, I'm just like, drag as comedy is funny if you're 6 and watching Bugs Bunny, but drag as comedy is not funny.
I mean, let's look at the era in which this joke was made.
Yeah,
the 80s, it would have been a different story than today. Today, it wouldn't be funny unless it was a trans comedian doing it for laughs.
Yeah.
And Scott here brought up that Whoopi wouldn't have had to call in a favor to Robin Williams. Robin Williams' schedule was just too full with multi-million-dollar projects at the time.
Which is true.
I can't remember right off the top of my head, but there was a role. Oh, I remember what it is. The episode of TNG where Professor Berlinghoff Rasmussen comes back or forward in time, however you want to look at it. That role was written with Robin Williams in mind, and he had to back out at the last minute. So that could have been a really interesting Robin Williams piece.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably one of the few who made the drag thing a little bit funny with Mrs. Doubtfire. So, but I mean, Mrs. Doubtfire had more to it than just Robin Williams walking around in drag. There was some heart behind it, but yeah, he's, you look at him, and to me, he would be I don't even know why they didn't even just refer to him, just name drop the man, because he was active at the time, and he was literally one of the greatest comedians in our generation.
I kind of on the video that I made about this episode, I asked why not another comedian besides Joe Piscopo? There was nobody else that they could have gotten. There's so many talented comedians of the time, not just Robin Williams, but George Carlin, just somebody, anybody else.
George Carlin might have broken the family friendly thing because George Carlin wasn't PG.
He could be. He was a train conductor on Thomas the Tank Engine.
I remember him in that, and then I remember seeing him as an adult as a comedian, and I'm like, holy cow, this is not Mr. Conductor. What the heck is this? Because I mean, I still like to watch his 7 words you can't say on TV and stuff like that.
Oh, I've got that out. I've got that on vinyl. It is one of the greatest albums of all time. Absolutely.
But at the same time, I could see why you'd have to be careful referencing him.
As far as why did we end up with Joe Piscopo, the next question is, what would the episode have been funnier if Jerry Lewis had been available? Because the role was originally written with Jerry Lewis in mind. He had tentatively said yes, but once the production schedule got set, he had a prior commitment. And then they cast Joe Piscopo kind of at the last minute.
Scott says any other comedian, please.
Then Jerry or Joe? Who are we talking about, Scott?
Anybody else than Joe Piscopo, I'm guessing. Yeah.
I heard that bit for the first time when I was way too young for it. I'm guessing he's referring to Carlin there.
Mhm.
So did I. Yeah.
But so, do you guys think that the episode would have been better if Jerry Lewis had been in the role, or would it have been the same thing with a bigger nostalgia factor?
I honestly think, you know, if Joe Piscopo was going off, you know, doing the script as is, I don't think it would have been much better. You know, I think he would have still led him astray. I think it would have been still this sticky class clown zinger, but dum thing. Like, that's not really Data's vibe. And he didn't even attempt to make a connection to where Data could relate and like draw comedy from his own life experience. I don't think Jerry Lewis would have made it much better if everything in this episode was like as scripted and Joe Piscopo just did the script. I don't think so.
Sean says, who can know who will still be a favorite comic in 30 years? They could have booked an unknown Chris Rock and got lucky. Who was to know? That's fair. I mean, humor changes over time, just like everything else.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and Dan says, I think it might be interesting to consider how this episode compares with Superman 3.
I don't
think
the
I've
Superman
seen it.
movie, so I don't.
I've seen it, but I saw it when I was really young. You're going to have to help us out there, Dan, because we're all drawing blanks.
The only thing I know is that Christopher Reeve was in it. Short of that.
Scott says, well, if it had been Carlin or Williams or Lewis, their legacies were pretty much set by this point. Well, that's true, yeah. I mean, I have a feeling that 20 years from now, people are still going to be talking about Robin Williams. I mean,
Like, that's the thing. Like, Data could have pulled up any comedian he wanted. It's a holodeck.
Yeah.
He could pull up anybody, alien, anybody, and he chose Joe Piscopo. Like, I think that's a very odd choice.
Yeah.
Well, he did just ask the computer for an appropriate 20th century comedian. So you can thank Majel.
Why
for
not
that.
a 24th century comedian, you know? Maybe so we would recognize them? Was that
I
why?
guess, but who recognizes Joe Piscopo? I mean, he wasn't famous then. He's not famous now.
I had to look him up the first time I saw this episode. I'm like, who the heck is this clown? Like,
He's done a couple
I
of
did
random
too.
things, but nothing really
yeah,
important.
I was just like, out of all the comedians, like, yeah, he's just it just didn't make sense to me. Like, it was like, let's pick somebody who's like on the edges of obscure for some people. And
Maybe he was just on the Paramount parking lot. That's my guess. He was just on the Paramount parking lot and was like, well, I'm here, so let's do it.
or he just
Richard
really
Pryor
needed
was
a
in
paycheck.
Superman 3? Cool.
Scott
Yeah, it
says
definitely
Superman
would have
3
been a
with
better
Richard
choice.
Pryor would also have been a better choice. Yeah. But yeah,
My God. If Richard Pryor was there instead, wow, that would have been something.
And Dan says Superman 3 had Richard Pryor. Eddie Murphy was supposed to have been in The Voyage Home. Eddie Murphy, if he could keep his humor within certain lines, would be funny. I mean, I do enjoy him as the donkey in Shrek. He's absolutely hilarious. But Eddie Murphy, and I do like Coming to America. If you want to hate me for that, you can. But I don't like the sequel. But the original Coming to America still makes me laugh.
It's a classic. It's a classic movie.
But yeah, Eddie Murphy would, as long as at least they didn't bring in Jerry Seinfeld, because he's a comedian I've never understood why people think he's funny.
I love Jason Alexander, and I love how he has come to Trek for us, but I've never understood Seinfeld either. I've seen his stand-ups, which are at least funnier than the show, but I still wouldn't watch them purposely.
Okay, so I'm not totally out to lunch.
No, you're not.
It was like Seinfeld is so great, and I'm like, I can't.
Nope.
I can't follow it.
I think its show is good, but at least the comedy that they show on the show doesn't make him look very good. It's bad. And it's like a very uncomfortable titter whenever he gives his like, what's the deal with airplane food? It's very that. And I like 80s comedy was a lot of that. And I don't think I could stand it if he got on there.
Yeah, and Sean just brought up something that I was trying to bring up here myself, that it's great that this whole thing is kicked off because Data goes and talks to Whoopi Goldberg as Guinan. And then she's like, well, I can't be your comic relief here because I'm part of the show.
Well, that and because, it wouldn't have made sense for Whoopi to all of a sudden draw on her comedic roots there, because Guinan was not supposed to be a comedian in the show. She was supposed to be like, she was the counselor that Deanna should have been, in my opinion.
Yes.
Well, the bartenders usually are, right? I mean, everybody went to,
Guinan had a warmth. Deanna was always kind of frigid to me.
I think you kind of have to be in order to be a therapist. Like, you're not supposed to really get involved, but you're basically paid to listen.
But even Riker called her on it. Like, even Riker mentioned, your betazoid aristocratic attitude. Even he called her on it. And that's the one time you see Riker say anything to her that's less than complimentary.
Ironically, Marina Sirtis, the actress who plays Deanna, is like the complete polar opposite of Deanna. Like, if they let her personality shine through a little bit, like with Nichelle and Ahura, I think it would have enhanced the character a lot.
I think they didn't know what they were doing with her, to be honest, and that she was just really there kind of like, okay, we should have a ship's counselor because there's families on the ship, but we don't really know what we're doing, and she's eye candy, so let's go with it type idea. Because
she needed them 3 titties to go with the original script.
Oh, I remember hearing about that, yeah. Sean says, fun fact, the Coming to America throne room was redressed as this ST5. I'm assuming that's
a redress of the Star Trek V shuttle bay.
Shuttle bay, yeah. The three. I remember that. And then that was followed up by Gene going on about Ferengi cod pieces and how Ferengi would be. And I can't remember who it was, but one of the producers looked at him and said, it's a show in a family slot in prime time. You can't do this.
Well, isn't that they've talked about lobe extensions before? Wouldn't that be the same thing?
That was at least fits with the characters, though, because, I mean, the Ferengi's entire culture is about their ears. The cod pieces and everything else would have been just kind of like... It would have made as much sense as 3 breasts on Deanna, I think.
Yes.
Especially because Deanna's not fully betazoid anyway. She's half human, so. Sean says, Deanna's role was cut in half whenever Whoopi was available. She worked for Scale and was an Oscar winner. She did the show for fun. Yeah, I remember Whoopi was on there. She basically said, don't even pay me. I'll just be on the show.
All right, we are running up against our time. Let's see if we can get a few more questions in. Why did Okona hide what he was doing when confronted, knowing the answers would come out anyway?
I want to give him the benefit of the doubt and say he has a code of honor. Like, I really want to give him that little bit of benefit of doubt here because he does have that little heart of gold thing. Like when he talks to the girl and points out, I've been couriering your messages. I've been passing things back and forth. I've smuggled you back and forth. I know you two really love each other, even if your parents can't grow up. So I kind of wonder if it was even just a little kernel. I want to believe that there's just a little kernel of good there. But I know Vanessa's already like shaking her head. So
it just felt like a PR piece, that whole thing at the end where the dispute between the two worlds and the forbidden love or whatever. I just, and honestly, like, he was this close to marrying that woman that he had no interest in if he kept his mouth shut. I definitely could have seen him just take advantage of this situation and allow himself to get married to this random person. Yeah, I don't see him as an honorable individual. I think he's very opportunistic, and this just happened to work out to make him look like a nice person.
That scene you were just talking about is the one that makes the least sense to me, because you've got the dad of the daughter there, and after he knows that it's not even Okona's baby, he's still like, oh, well, you'll marry Okona then. It didn't make any sense.
Yeah, it does, because like Deanna pointed out, they're dealing with a culture that has very traditional mindset about things like pregnancy and motherhood. And if you want to go with the most conservative examples we can, look at Earth religions. It doesn't matter. It didn't matter in the Earth religions. Like, okay, if the father of the child wasn't going to step up, the important thing was that at least she'd be freaking married. Like, she has to be married before this baby is born, even if it's not the father of the child. So in that sense, it kind of fit, because if they're that conservative, that the onus is she must be married. This child can't be born out of wedlock.
That sort of like gives it a weird ethnocentric vibe that like the Federation is so much more evolved, you know, and these people are just so simple that they'll just marry off their pregnant daughter to anybody. That's a little silly to me. Like,
You've seen that in
it
TNG.
just made them seem so simple-minded in contrast.
I get that. Well, we've seen it in TNG before, though, like that kind of thing. I mean, look at the I can't remember the episode, but the one with the ones where they're basically a really bad parody of Irish farmers. You know?
Oh my God! People say that Code of Honor is racist. My white boy ass will say it's not. But
Code
what
of
I
Honor-
will say is the most racist thing Star Trek has ever done is up the long ladder, which you're talking about with the Space Irish.
Yeah, that's the one I was saying. Yeah, Code of Honor is the one where it's like really bad parody of African tribalism.
Yeah,
Yep.
they characterize an entire planet as alien black people with, you know, just sort of Pan-African garb,
Yeah.
and that was what marked them as alien. It was pretty damn racist to like make them warrior-like and aggressive and like. Ugh,
It's definitely culturally appropriating, 100%.
Kind of like the Kirok episode in TOS.
Yeah, it's kind of the same. I'd say that might even be worse.
Although
Though
that
I actually like that ending.
To be fair, though, that one isn't too out of order for the time, whereas Space Irish kind of was.
Yeah, it was. Even by the end of the like, really?
Yeah. But I mean, they were.
I just wonder, you know, Cole Meany standing there watching this scene of like, you know, Irish pig farmers, like you know, English people dressed up as that, like.
He said after the fact that he wanted to speak up about it, but where it was an early episode and he was a background character, where that was literally the first episode where he got a name, he didn't want to speak up about it and get himself kicked off. But he wasn't happy with that portrayal either.
Exactly. And the drinking thing, and oh man, it was bad.
Anyway, back to we have just a couple questions left on this episode. Did Okona make the choice he did to out everybody? Like, was it deliberately planned, or did he just get lucky?
That's what I kind of want. I know I was responsible for this question, and to me, like, I kind of got the sense that he was, because he is somewhat of a con man, and you don't get to be a con man and space rogue without having a little bit of duplicitness. So I kind of wonder if he was manipulating things at the end there to kind of push the kids to come out and say it, because no one's going to believe him, realistically. No one's going to believe, you know, Han Solo in Star Trek verse here. And I kind of got the impression just from the way he talked to the two young people and the way they reacted to him, that he was trying to push things a little bit to get them to sort of be like, this is what really happened. Kind of like how some lawyers will kind of trick people in the courtroom into like spilling the beans, or parents do with kids to get their kids to spill the beans. But that was just my impression, but I could be wrong. Vanessa's kind of got thoughts, I think.
Sometimes. I just thought, like, I think it was just, it just happened to make him look like matchmaker, make me a match at that point. Like, it was a PR piece. Like, look, I'm really a nice person. I'm not just a womanizer. I don't just go around banging petty officers all the time. I actually have, like, you know, things going for me that make me look like a good person. So, like, I think that outing thing was just another accomplishment for him. See, I'm a nice guy.
Well, TNG, I noticed too, more than the other Star Treks, tends to have a little bit more of a moralizing aspect at the end of a lot of episodes. Like, they want to tie it up in a pretty package with a bow and be like, see, everything's happy.
Right. But like this plot kind of came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
See, it had nothing to do with the rest of the episode at all. Had nothing to do with Data being a comedian. Had nothing to do with Okona being a cocky guy doing whatever with whatever women. It was just like, oh, this thing is happening now, and we have to deal with it. That's what happens when you have an episode with no plot, especially in TNG. They stick the stakes way at the end, and it was very shoehorned in and weird.
Usually, they stick Majel Barrett Roddenberry in the episode when they don't really know what they're going to do with it.
Hey, to be fair, Loaxana is a better character than people give her credit for. I mean, she
has her moments. She has a couple of really, really good episodes.
Her and Odo. To me, the whole thing with her and Odo, because like Odo and Kira, they love each other and all that, but some of theirs I have to wonder if it's trauma bonding because they went through the war together. But you get Loaxana and Odo, and that's one where he agrees to marry her to save her. And you hear the way he really talks about her when he really expresses things and how she talks about, and you can tell that there is a genuine, like it's platonic, but there is a genuine love and affection there. And at the end of the day, for all her eccentricities, which we find out were really hiding a lot of things, she's made that clear on more than one occasion that her eccentricities are to hide her inner turmoil, like with Kestra and everything else. She's actually a really warm-hearted, like she's what I always imagined Betazoids would be if they're really that like telepathic, empathic, that open of a species. She really just at the end of the day, she just wants to give everybody love and just wants everybody to feel loved when she's around. As silly, I mean, look at her and Alexander. She bonded with Alexander in a way that his own father didn't.
I found that episode highly creepy.
It was creepy, but
it's really grooming and weird.
Which one? I'm sorry.
I can't remember the name of it right now, but the one where Loaxana keeps taking Alexander to the holodeck.
Oh,
the mud baths.
That weird like clown thing. Oh
yes.
Man, that was weird.
The clown bothered me because I have a thing with clowns, but I get where she was coming from because she's trying to approach him. I mean, Loaxana is not unfamiliar with hybrids. Her own daughter's a hybrid. And Loaxana picks up that Alexander's hybrid right away. And Alexander really does take to her because she's like the first person, like Deanna to him is just the person who's trying to make him get along with daddy. Worf is so obsessed with his Klingonness that he can't father. She's the first person who's like, this is a child. He wants to do child things. He wants to play in mud. He wants fairy tales. This is what he needs. He's not like a little mini Klingon warrior. He's a child,
Coming back to the episode that we're actually talking about, I have one off-script question. Was Okona's joke about the parakeets, if you can keep half of them flying at all times, you'll be all right, even if you load twice your load. Was that funnier than anything that Data and Joe Piscopo did?
The way you just phrased it was your load. I'm sorry, my mind went 12 years old.
I thought that Data not. I just was struck by like how Data not laughing at that silly ass joke was indicative of him like having absolutely no sense of humor, according to Okona. Like you must not get humor at all then, and it's like. There's nothing helpful about what he was doing in that interaction. And I don't think that joke was as good as he thought it was.
To be fair, though, we don't know if Okona's really had much interaction with androids because it's been mentioned multiple times that Data's like a one of. He's unique. Synthetics aren't common at this point.
Yeah, but even like another human being that doesn't laugh at your joke, would you talk to them that way? Like, would you say you must not get humor at all? Like that was really.
Well, he was also trying. That would go to his ego, I think, because you mentioned him being like egotistical and stuff like that. Think about it. He's used to everyone laughing at him. Now this guy doesn't laugh at him. But at the same time, I saw it as Okona was actually trying to say something about himself, but using humor to deflect. Because, I mean, I've often said that teaching is like having a bus full of chickens, but it's on fire and you've got to keep the tour going. So I get where he's saying, you know, you overload your cargo hold, but as long as you can keep half of them alive, you're doing okay. So in a way, I saw it as more like Okona was revealing a little bit about how he thinks, but using humor to hide behind it because he can't be serious. And then when his joke fell flat, it's kind of like, well, crap, this guy doesn't think I'm like awesome. What is this? Like, you know, so his poor reaction could have been a result of that.
I thought it was funnier than the fish being a briefcase.
I honestly do not find the fish being a briefcase funny. I'm just like, I don't
think it was supposed to be. Honestly, that's the thing. Like, Joe Piscopo is so unfunny to me that like I thought it was supposed to be like meant to convey failure from the jump. That he's not funny at all, you know, and we're not supposed to perceive him that way.
Dan's got an interesting thought. I suspect the comedian's humor was impaired because he was a hologram, probably programmed by someone who's not a comedian. That could make sense, actually.
It's a really good point.
Yeah, that's a good perspective, Dan. I didn't even think of that. Oh, Scott's got something here.
Yeah, I think you've made it pretty clear, Scott, and I think we all agree with you. We could have gotten anybody but Joe Piscopo, whoever he is truly.
Okay, this is probably up, Scott. This is probably up there as like my second least favorite casting ever, behind Benedict Cumberbatch's Khan. So I agree.
That's a sore subject. You might not want to step in that.
I'm not the only one who thinks it, and it's not because I have
You're not.
I do like the actor. He's a fantastic actor. And even he says he regrets taking the role because even he says he wasn't right for it. So
I don't think anybody is right for it, really. I don't think there's any living actor that could portray Khan the way Ricardo Montalban left us.
I don't know. There's some pretty interesting Bollywood actors. I mean, they could have started at least there instead of finding the most whitest British guy they could find.
I agree with you.
But no, like Benedict Cumberbatch, there was the thing too of the chemistry. He's a great actor, but him and Chris Pine don't have they don't have that on-screen chemistry that we get from Shatner and Montalban. Like those two, you can just feel the hate. Sean says, yeah, a white English guy should play an Indian who was previously played by a South American. To be fair, though,
Mexican, not South American, but
they couldn't really find, I mean, back then you weren't going to find Bollywood actors like in the 60s. Bollywood wasn't even really getting off the ground even then. Like Bollywood didn't explode until about the 80s.
But there's plenty of comedians that they could have chosen and they didn't.
Yeah. They could have chosen a lot of comedians. Yeah, Scott says whatever the guy's name was on SNL at the same time as Eddie Murphy, believe it or not.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with Piss. Cop. Piscopo. There you go.
That just sounds wrong. My 12-year-old mind just went somewhere wrong there. Piss cop. It makes me think of like a guy I saw getting arrested outside of Comic-Con one year for literally doing something on the side of the building, and he got caught.
We've all been there.
The bonus point was he was in a stormtrooper outfit.
The real bonus points is if there were 2 streams.
I wasn't looking.
Oh, Klingon dick jokes. Anyway, do we have any more? Do my wonderful co-hosts here have any more questions about this episode that we're actually talking about?
Don't think so.
Nope.
We've run over our time, but we will be back probably with a few more people tomorrow morning as we talk about Prodigy's Preludes. That's going to be fun.
Says how many rank pips?
Oh, yeah, we should probably do that for fun, huh?
And Scott, if you want to know what he was trying to aim at, you can privately message me. And Sean goes, right. We know stormtroopers can't aim.
Oh my God. So, Vanessa, how many rank pips would you like to give the Outrageous Okona as we outrageously step away from
I'd
the
say it's a
episode?
2. I think the worship of somebody who's not that good of a person, there's nothing quantifiably admirable about him other than the fact that the writers made him a ladies' man. And I don't know why, because I can't. He's like the least attractive person in this episode to me. He's egotistical and annoying, and they made that the person to admire. And Wesley looked at him as a role model. I don't know why, but yeah, it just seems very topsy turvy for everybody for this episode to center around somebody so annoying. But like, it's not unwatchable, but I don't like it. So 2.
I'm going to go 2.5. The Romeo and Juliet bit there at the end is a little weird. And I mean, I'll disagree. I actually kind of like the way Okona looks, but that's just me. I have a thing for bad boys. But, and it was, to me, it's a fun episode. It's just like a fun bit of brain candy. Like, I don't have to think about it. I can put it on, just watch it. But I mean, it is cheesy, so it loses. But also there's that interaction of Data and the comedian. And to me, that's a personal thing because of bonding over that episode with a student, and seeing how they related to that whole episode and seeing them try to grow in humor. So it gives me that kind of perspective. So I kind of 2.5 because I can't go either way.
I'm not even going to give it one. If one full pip is an ensign, then I'm giving this 3 cadet pips in Wesley Crusher's third year. I've got this number 660th out of 755 live action episodes that I've ranked on my channel. So it's not the worst. That's for sure. It's not Threshold. It's not Spock's Brain. It's not Code of Honor. But it also doesn't have anything really going for it. It's just here by virtue of not being that bad. It just doesn't have anything good also.
Right. Characters actually don't develop except for maybe Data finding that humor is a little more difficult, and he ends up exactly where he was at the start.
Scott says 2 pips, and Sean says, so this episode is a Nick Locarno. It's not a Sub Rosa. It's not a 50 Shades of Riker, but it's... I could see Nick Locarno. Vanessa, you're...
I think Dustin's muted.
Oh, here I am. Anybody want to say anything else before we call it a day? Well, thanks for joining us. Yeah, this has been completely interesting, not too scripted or very impromptu. I'd like to thank everybody that's come and watched. This has been more questions we've seen in the comments in a long time. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit the like and subscribe button down below. We've had a ton of fun here. Come join us tomorrow morning on Saturday at noon Eastern time here in the U.S. And thanks for joining us on Subspace Chatter. I'd like to thank our panelists, Vanessa and Eve, and her wonderful bear. And we will see you tomorrow. Live long and prosper.